Welcome to the Growler, a Who Dey podcast hosted by Paul Dana and other bald friends like Mo Egger, Dave Nenemetz, home of all your Bengals breaks, takes. Welcome to the Growler.
All right, welcome into the latest edition of Balds Don't Lie. I'm the Growler, Paul Dana Jr., here with you as we head into the offseason, full swing into the offseason here. Bengals defensive coordinator search is ongoing, but it's that time where we can just start letting it out. We can start hypothesizing, planning, talking about what the Bengals should do over the course of a relentless next 7 to 8 months, where we'll discuss the same things but louder as we go on. And I figured this would be a great place to start in that realm with bringing in my guy, our guy, ESPN 1530, our friend Mo Egger. What's up, buddy?
Happy New Year. How we doing?
Doing good. Happy New Year to you. The 12-leg parlay, as many 12-leg parlays do, came up a bad beat short. Right? Like this was the perfect way for a 12-leg parlay to end. Anybody that's ever been in betting and decided that 12-leg parlays are their thing knows you tell the story to everyone about the bad beat you took on the last leg. You were so close. It all was happening. Everything fell into place except this one thing, and now you hate that thing forever.
Was it a bad beat though? I mean,
no.
The Chiefs Broncos game kicked off at 4:25. By 4:40, I had stopped thinking about the playoffs, a possible first round matchup with the Bills, and I was on to what ifs, and you and I talked about all them. I mean, there is a part of me that appreciates what the Chiefs did because we didn't get tortured, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't, Chiefs 21, Broncos 19, and Denver lines up for the playoff bid ceiling kick, and it knocks the Bengals out of the postseason. That would have been painful. Look, I don't blame the Chiefs for what they did. They had the right to do what they did. Andy Reid's job is to act in his team's best interest. But it was amusing, the absolute lack of any interest those players on the field had in playing that football game. And so as much as I wish Kansas City would have won, as much as I wish they would have played all their starters, as much as I wish the guys who played would have played better or harder or at least some interest in competing, I found myself, I'll call it painfully amused by what I was watching in Denver on Sunday.
Yeah, and painful ends up being a word that comes up a lot more about this season because the moment it ends, the moment it becomes official, everybody, the goodwill of the last 5 weeks quickly fades, and you start focusing on, we talked about the masochism rankings yesterday on your show of what moment were people sitting there thinking about as they watched that, and you focus more on what went wrong, and then it quickly gets into the Bengals doing the same and quickly moving on from Lou Anarumo and Frank Pollock and James Betcher and Marion Hobby, and Jay and I talked about all of those yesterday, but I want to kind of shift it forward into more of an off-season mode with you, Mo. We're going to talk a little bit about some of sort of the checklist of things and what the priority should be and what some of the the more broad philosophical angles are to that. But I want to start with this. So there's been a lot of discussion, and you asked me about this yesterday, talking about Zach Taylor you can't keep blowing out your staff, right? You can't, you're eventually going to have to move on. And if Zach Taylor was Duke Tobin's guy, Duke Tobin and Mike Brown were up there on the dais and in introducing him, and this was Duke's search, this was his guy. How many, if you had to move on from Zach Taylor, how many does he get? How many chances does Duke Tobin get? And he's so different. He's been, around forever. And I don't really have an answer to that. I didn't have an answer to that for you yesterday. And I don't know that I ever really will, because it's a different scenario than almost anybody else in the building. I have heard, from all of you and the amount of emails to the Growler Podcast at Gmail or to Twitter or to whatever that I get saying, keep requesting Duke. We need to hear from Duke. The personnel side of this needs to be addressed. I mean, I get it. I've been getting it every day since this season started going sideways. And so, we do. Like we do. The end of season setup has never been one where they have put, a lot of teams do this. And no, they don't have to. You have to have somebody up there when the season ends. And taking questions, right? They don't have to do that, where you can have the personnel person, typically GM, and the head coach. A lot of them do. The Bengals don't do that. They have waited for the combine or the Senior Bowl, which is at the end of January, where Duke Tobin is at to start addressing the offseason. I put in a request for him to be available to take questions because all of you, I hear you constantly. We need to be able to ask these questions. They denied that request. They didn't want to do it that way. They didn't want to change their precedent on that. Is that a problem for you, Mo? I'm honestly curious, from someone who deals and hears with the fans and wants the answers just as much as we do. Is that a problem, or does it feel like running, or is that just a team exercising their right?
Kind of a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
It's certainly their right. There are no rules. It's why I always feel bad. I talked about this during the Red season that ultimately cost David Bell his job. The Reds are a little bit more open when it comes to, Nick Kroll spoke the other day about the trade the Reds made. But like the manager of a baseball team has multiple media availabilities every day and has to answer questions about things that he often has nothing to do with, like players getting injured and their rehab and what the front office is doing. And I often feel bad for people like that. And Zach Taylor has, during the season, 3 mandatory media availabilities during the season, one after the game, and then typically one on Monday, one on Wednesday. And fair, fine, understandably so, but at times, especially here, is forced to answer questions about things that he has nothing to do with. And that's why I wish they would make Duke available to take the burden off Zach so he doesn't have to answer questions like, to me, you want to ask Zach, why didn't you go for it on 4th down? That's a Zach Taylor question. You want to ask, why didn't this player get nearly as many snaps? That's a Zach Taylor question. What happened with this player in free agency, and what did you guys see in him? Well, that's a Duke Tobin question, or a question about the draft. Like, that's why I wish they would do it, so that you didn't have as many instances where somebody is having to publicly face heat for something that they are not as involved in. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like if I was Duke Tobin, I would say, like, dude, all right. Zach should have to answer the questions about the things he's responsible for. He shouldn't have to answer the questions about the things that I'm responsible for. So I'll answer them. And maybe it's not going to be once a week, but it could be periodically. Like, what would be the harm in midway through the season, the personnel guy just gives sort of you guys a chance to ask questions for 20 minutes? What's the harm?
I think the harm in their eyes is that the season needs to be in season and the focus needs to be on that.
Okay.
But anymore, and this is maybe partially how they view the trade deadline, because that's usually where this comes up, right? A lot of GMs, after the trade deadline, you see GMs across the league sitting in front of, the media addressing why they did or didn't do whatever they did, whether in Baltimore with DaCosta or Andrew Berry in Cleveland, we see it, and teams do it differently, but because that's part of the season now, like your ability to make these moves and choose not to, or do whatever, you feel they feel a need to talk to their fan base about those, because that's part of the season now. I don't know that they view it in that same respect. They want Zach Taylor to be their in-team spokesman. And in the offseason, they don't, like, Duke has never been one to run from questions in the offseason. It's just been a matter of sort of when those very public availabilities happen. Yeah. And so it's just a matter of if that calendar should be reconstructed. If you're not going to do it after the trade deadline, which I'll respect that, season's a season. I mean, once you've been eliminated and you turn forward immediately to the offseason, I feel like there's a lot of things that we've asked Zach, and it's been, well, that's a Duke question. That's that's something I can't answer. That that deserve answers before it fully turns into, oh, here I am talking about the draft. Like
Right.
there's just so much more to that. And it feels like that would be, this is the time. And the fans, I mean, trust me, they want it. I mean, it is like, and I don't think it's just a pitchforks thing. I think it is, please help that. They're like, help us understand.
Yes.
I don't feel like they understand what is happening and what the plan was or how things have gone wrong. And that causes so much of the anger. So much of the anger and dissent comes from a feeling of not understanding. And I think in this moment right now, and what they felt over the course of the second half of the season specifically, is please help us understand, is what I hear. That's what I see from fans all the time.
Yeah, so from my perspective, I'd like to hear from Duke Tobin, not because I want to see him embarrassed, not because I want to see him squirm. I'm a fan of perspectives.
Yeah.
Right? I'm a fan of perspectives as a fan. Also, those perspectives give me things to talk about. Like I'm a fan of, how do you see this? What's the explanation? What's next? Those perspectives can be offered in a non-confrontational, non-contentious way. I mean, I certainly believe it would be awesome to have you do a sit down with him or do a podcast with him. Like I'd be all about that. I think everybody watching or listening to this would also be all about that. What's interesting to me is he's not even made available to the team's own outlets, right? He does the thing during the preseason games where he sits in the booth with Mike Watt and Anthony Munoz, and I actually think those are pretty good.
Yeah, really good.
Because, I think those are pretty good because you're getting in real time. Here's the guy who picked some of these guys and they're playing. Like, I think that's really, really good. And it's not like Duke's a poor public speaker. It's I mean, so like they do that and then radio silence until the combine or the Senior Bowl. And so it's interesting to me that they don't even make him available. And not that Dan Horde or Jeff Hobson or those guys are going to throw softballs, but they are the team's own outlets. And so, I guess they could say, well, we're not making them available to you, but we also don't make them available to our own guys either. That's interesting to me. But yeah, I mean, look, here you have somebody who is in charge of something. This something just did something. It had a season. They could have gone 17-0 and won the Super Bowl. I would still love to hear the de facto general manager's thoughts on the team and then what's next. Like, yeah. It doesn't have to be, well, I want to hear Duke after they go 9-8, or I want to hear from Duke after they go a second straight year without making the playoffs. I'd want to hear from Duke after successes. I'd like to hear Duke's thoughts on what they've done with the coaching staff, even if he's not ultimately in charge of hiring those assistants or firing them. There are questions about some of the players that were brought in this offseason that either didn't contribute as much as expected or didn't contribute at all. Give us your perspective on those things. And the unwillingness of them to do that. Here's what I want to know, because I fling it back to Duke. Knowing the franchise the way you do and covering it as closely as you do, if Duke Tobin himself said, look, I want to do an availability. I want to answer questions on the record, have everybody come down. Would the organization tell him no? Like, does he have the power to say, I'm going to go and I'm going to make myself available and I'll take the tough questions and I'll do it at the end of the year. And then I'll do it again after the draft. And then I'll do it again, maybe right before the season. I'm going to do these things I typically don't do. Does he have the ability to say, like, organizationally, we haven't done this, now I'm going to?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. He can control. I mean, it's his team. I mean, in so many ways. I mean, he's the personnel guy. So anytime where personnel becomes the centerpiece, he can dictate how he wants to choose to address that or not. And this is the way that they've done it. And that's just, like I said earlier, like it's not like a thing where I feel like he is running from any of this stuff. I don't think that he views it that way. I just think that this is the time where it's like most needed, that, and this is a milepost here. And yes, absolutely. He could come down and say, yeah, this is the time I want to do it.
And so for me, there's the angle of, like, if Joe Burrow throws 4 interceptions and costs them the game, he's going to answer questions.
Yes.
As he should, right? we're going to want to hear from him. And maybe you're going to be dissatisfied with what he says, but he's going to have to answer questions. Duke Tobin was the architect of a team that went 9-8. It's not a terrible team, but it's a team that underachieved and isn't playing in the postseason. And everybody else in the organization, at least players and coaches, at some point they have to speak to their failures. Lou Anarumo was available to you guys in the throes of his defense performing so poorly it cost him his job. And I even said it to you and Jay, like, I think it's pretty cool that he did that. He could have said, like, pound sand, guys, I'm not doing it. So on one level, you have everybody else who is either it's mandatory that they have to speak to their failures or successes. Some that do it even though it's not mandatory, and then Duke doesn't. I think, number one, he's certainly exercising his right, as is the organization. I think, number two, that looks sort of shitty. I mean, it does. Like that's bad. That looks bad. And then number three, just as a fan and as a talk show host, I like perspectives. I like to hear different people's perspectives on successes and failures. And so I wish we heard from him on a more frequent basis. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so there will be times we will hear from him multiple times as we get through, and obviously the combine ends up being a very big one, and you know that. I mean, with that, people know that schedule now like clockwork. It's one of the biggest sessions that we get with Duke at that point. That's at the end of February, though. I mean, you're at that point you're right coming up against free agency and everything else. But so we'll keep an eye out for that going forward. Let's talk about some of the things we will be talking about with Duke next time we talk with him, and that is the offseason checklist. I'm gonna set it up this way for you, Mo, because I know you have done this with Tony on your Tony and Mo football show, and we've kind of touched on it a little bit yesterday, but I want to give you, it's next September 1st. Okay, what are the things that you hope prioritize for me? Number one thing, and we'll go down our list of our top 3 or 4 here, things that you want to say, man, I'm glad the Bengals did it this way. I'm glad that this happened. What is the number one things you want to see?
So are you talking about like addressing positions, that sort of thing?
Yeah, whatever.
Any
off-season issue. Literally any off-season issue. It could be the defensive coordinator. It could be Chase. It could be the offensive line and how they attack that. It could be the defensive personnel. It could be giving you free season tickets just because they like your face. Maybe that's it.
Wow. Well, I think if I were to go in like order of things that could be scraped off the plate first, can the Jamar Chase thing happen today?
Yeah. Yesterday,
right?
Maybe. Yeah.
I mean, like, hey, season's over. You won't negotiate during the season, so let's pick this back up, get this done, so it's over, and it's not a thing. So, is that, as it relates to the 2025 team, the most pressing thing? Maybe not. Jamar's under contract to play next season, but I certainly do believe there's validity to the idea that the best way to set a tone for the offseason is to go ahead and get this done first. I think there would also be a real fun sort of energy just that would permeate its way through the fan base that would be mildly helpful. So I guess if I were to look at like, well, what are the things you can cross off first? They can't draft players for 3.5 months. They can sign Jamar Chase right now. So just go ahead and get that done. There's no wrong answer to this. There isn't, because they have so many things they have to get done and so many needs. But I guess the first thing for me, despite all of the very understandable focus on fixing the defense, which we make sound a lot easier than it is, they started last season in the draft on the path toward building an elite offensive line. Because my take with Amarius Mims was, if you're ever going to build something better than a league average offensive line, it's going to have to happen through the draft. So step one was Amarius Mims. Do they have an elite offensive line? By no stretch. You can never go wrong making your first priority protecting Joe Burrow. Never. I have talked about this often this year. Can you imagine how cool it would be and what this offense and this quarterback could accomplish if he was playing behind a great offensive line? I want to see that sometime. I want to see him play behind that offensive line Andy Dalton played behind in 2015. Takes a lot of work to get there. I want to continue toward that. I want to see them add an offensive lineman via the draft, or I guess maybe in free agency, but via the draft that I go, okay, he and Amarius Mims are the building blocks to what could one day be a high-end offensive line. They played with fire this year, man. As great as Joe was, as much as the defense sunk their season, you had to watch every snap. They played with fire. You know, I was watching Hard Knocks last night, and they showed Joe getting rammed to the turf with two guys basically landing on his helmet, and you're like, you saw the look that Zach Taylor had. It was like, oh boy, that's my meal ticket, right?
Yep.
That's the meal ticket. So, yes, they have to fix the defense. Yes, I've railed about it all year long. Yeah, there's a long list of things they have to do. None of this works if something happens to Joe Burrow. Take the steps necessary to better ensure that nothing happens to Joe Burrow, and take the steps necessary to better ensure them, I guess, of one day having an offensive line that's better than a one that has a ceiling of being league average.
Yeah, and I think it's a simple fix. You love your tackles right now.
Yeah,
you got them for multiple years. Orlando
Yes.
Brown's got 2 more years left. You have Amarius Mims on the rookie deal. Ted Karras was solid. You got him for 1 more year that you extended him for. You've got some backups that I think you liked the depth in. Injuries kind of, I think there's a lot of excitement about what Jackson Kirkland maybe can be, what maybe Matt Lee can be. I think they can easily bring back Cody Ford.
Yes.
He proved to be Cody Ford is a great 6.
Yeah.
Okay. Like,
yes,
he's the perfect 6. He might win a starting guard spot next year in competition with somebody, because they never really got to totally see that, but they loved his personality. They loved the way he played. He's so versatile. He proved his versatility this year. That's great. They need a starting guard. Kappa will be gone. You have to assume that's going to happen. They need the next round of Alex Kappa, and they need another young player in there, probably a draft. And then all of a sudden, everything feels like it fits a lot better. Go sign a real guard in free agency, dedicate some level of draft pick, and throw it into a big competition there with Kirkland and Ford and Volson and a premium pick, and may the best man win. And maybe there's even a bargain free agent in there, a starting level type guy in there as well. That to me, and that now you really like the setup of your offense.
Yeah.
It really feels like it can be truly solid. And so I don't think it's in the past it's felt like after 21, like, how in the world are you going to fix this thing?
Starting from scratch.
I don't think it totally feels like that, but the guard play is just disaster. And if you can just focus on those 2 spots, I think you feel a lot better.
You referenced something, so my show notes from yesterday, you were nice enough to join me on the phone for an hour, and there's always stuff that I don't get to. One of my questions was going to be, why can't Cody Ford start next season?
He can.
He looks like a guy that could play, maybe not at an all-pro level, but that you would be happy plugging in and starting 17 games.
Yeah, I love Cody Ford as the competition.
Yes.
In the worst case scenario, if he loses, is he's your 6th. That's
awesome.
That is the perfect position for him to be in. Yeah.
Awesome. So to me, that's the way you framed it is exciting. You're more than happy with your tackles, right? Like Amarius Mims, that's a good draft choice, and Orlando Brown, entered himself into Bengals lore by playing on a broken leg. Like, how are you not thrilled with those 2 guys? They're not starting from scratch. This isn't 2021, but they've got some work to do. And you can, and again, we're going to spend the next 3.5 months debating what should they do with the 17th pick. And, when you have so many team needs, there's no wrong answer. You can never go wrong in protecting your most precious asset. And look, it's going to catch up to him at some point. It has in the past. If Joe takes as many hits game to game next year as he did this past season, he's not going to play 17 games. And if he doesn't play 17 games, the rest of it's irrelevant. So that to me, as I think of the offseason stuff that has to get done, I am dying to see what it looks like if Joe Burrow jogs onto the field and we go, you know what? He's going to go untouched for most of this game, and he can actually stand in the pocket, and he doesn't have to improvise, and he doesn't have to throw passes landing on his knee, and he doesn't have to hold the ball for 9 seconds to find dudes in the end zone. He can play normal quarterback behind a really good offensive line. If that happens, can you even imagine what this offense can get done? I think it's really exciting to think about. And you're right, they're not starting from scratch with that unit, but they do have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, it's you imagine it goes from being basically about the 5th best offense in football to the 1st.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's because everything else is really in place. They've proven adept at getting their skill players into positions to get them open. They might be as good as anybody in football at that, at using Gesicki and the way they used Chase and the way that they had guys moving all over the place and the way they used Chase Brown and all of that stuff. Like that's all there. You got to fix line as part of it. For me, I have gone back and forth on this, and we've discussed this on the pod, but since we're going through the checklist of priorities, I hope that you sit there and say, like, this is piggybacking off of the Jamar thing and just say, man, how about no drama? How about there's been no drama? They said T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow are a team. They paid them all. They're all wildly rich. They're all proud to be Bengals. They're all in their prime. Those 3 guys are the team. And they're all excited to be here, and they all are trying to go win a Super Bowl for the team that paid them. I hope you're sitting there well before September, definitely before training camp starts. It would have to be well before that, more than likely, and can say that's the case. I hope that that's the case, because I feel like there is so much volatility in play if this goes sideways, that it can yet again cause distractions with real ripple effects into the season and beyond. And you don't want to play with this fire. This is not one you want to mess with. And I think you can explain away logically, as we have here, why you wouldn't pay T. Higgins. But with him switching to Jamar's agent, him wanting to be here, the way he handled this season, the fact that Burrow so badly wants it, and the fact that they don't really have other people to pay, I just feel like you just go, no drama. Let's not play with this fire. Let's pay these guys what they're worth. Let's find a way to make it happen. Play chess, as Jamar says, and find a way to do it and go from there. I hope, to me, that's the number one priority by the end of the offseason, that you're sitting here and you can say they handled that right by avoiding the drama there and getting that done.
I want them to make my job in August really hard, because this year it was really easy. I could talk about Jamar Chase every single day. The year before, I could talk about T. Higgins every single day. The year before that, I could talk about Jesse Bates every single day. We're going to get, what do we always talk about? A normal offseason for Joe Burrow. We're going to get that, right? Barring something catastrophic, knock on wood. We're going to get the normal Joe Burrow offseason. There's no injury he's coming off of, no surgery. Awesome. Hopefully no internal organ issues right before camp. So I guess here's my question. Let's say they get the Jamar thing done and T. Higgins is re-signed. Where would controversy be most likely to come from?
I mean, that's Trey Hendrickson.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, and to me, that's the question. Let me ask you this. And we've touched around this, and because there's a chance it could come down to this. Would you trade Trey Hendrickson in order to keep T. Higgins?
In order to keep T. Higgins, and
if I gave you that choice and I said, look, I think the only place this money comes from is the remaining 16, whatever the actual cash is left on Trey next year.
Yes.
That's where the money comes from. Would you trade Trey Hendrickson and say that'll get you T?
Yeah. Well, first of all, if I'm trading Trey Hendrickson, I'm probably getting a lot back, right?
You are.
I might be trading the defensive player of the year. Boy, what a luxury. The defense stunk, right? So we're going to trade.
I'm saying it sounds it's weird to even talk about, but I'm just saying if that's what it came down to from a pie perspective, of course.
Yeah.
We get our pies in.
I asked you this on the show yesterday. So Trey Hendrickson had a really good 2023. And then from my standpoint, I understood, like, I'm going to see if I can parlay this into more money and more years. Like, who wouldn't do that? And I can understand the Bengals going, yeah, pal, you signed a 1-year extension a year ago. We've got 2 years left. You're going to be 30 by the end of this season. Hang tight. Well, what has happened since? He's been even better. And now there's one fewer year on the contract. Maybe the person to ask is Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
you?
like, there's a part of me that if I'm Trey Hendrickson, I'm sidling up to Joe and going, hey, man, could you mention me? but for me, the answer is yes. T's a younger player. It's hard because Trey Hendrickson was awesome this year, especially in the context of having no help. T is a younger player, and I could get a lot in return for Trey Hendrickson. So I solved the problem of where's the money for T going to come from, and I add to my ability to make upgrades to the roster elsewhere. But then where's the pass rush going to come from? I mean, it's whack-a-mole.
Yeah, no doubt.
Right?
That's the problem. Is now you've now created a big 2025 problem.
Right.
And
so
for no reason.
So, like, all right, there's where the controversy. And again, if I'm Trey Hendrickson and I asked for a trade last year because I sought to get an extension or more money, well, hey, I'm going to take my DPOY hardware into Mike Brown's office and go, hey, man, I got one of these now. So what are we doing? Right? I mean, like, so that to me is one of the it's maybe the most interesting question of the offseason. If you're trying to have the most serene training camp and preseason and offseason possible, what are they going to do with Trey Hendrickson? And I think more than anything, what is Trey Hendrickson thinking right now? And if I was him right now, I'd be doubling up on my efforts to get more money and get more years on my deal, armed with the season that I just had.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be, let's talk about an extension. And I don't know that that'll be a place that they would be able to go or want to go. And then what comes next? I don't think serene will be a word we will be used to describe this offseason. Inevitably, I think there could be a lot of, well, this is what they should do. This is what they could do. The reality of where this ends is that it could go any number of ways. I think there's hope that they can solve these big problems. But I think there is also a reality that they're not going to be able to solve all of them, and that there's going to have to be some things that are going to make people unhappy. That probably that come as part of this, and they're going to have to, it's a tough job, and Duke Tobin is the one that's going to have to be the one to do it, and I can't wait when we get to ask him about all of it.
The T. Higgins conversation over the last month, I think because of Joe Burrow, understandably so, we simplified it. Sign T. Figure out the rest. Well, it will come at the expense of something. Maybe what it comes at the expense of is something you can figure out a way to work around. But what if it did come at the expense of Trey Hendrickson? And, I asked you this when this first started after the Dallas game about signing T, and you said, well, if you do that, it's kind of doubling down on why you lost this year. Well, can you imagine anything that doubles down more on why they lost this year than keeping T and trading away their one good defensive player?
Yeah.
But it might be necessary.
If you're getting young, as long as what you're getting in return turns directly into young defensive assets for a new defensive coordinator, then you can see how that can pan out. But yeah, you can't change the level of production that you get from Trey Hendrickson. His ability as a closer is just unrivaled, really, almost. And so you're just, it's a tough call. How do you? But really, hire the DC. I'd be very curious his thoughts on that, obviously, too.
Yes. Wait a minute. So I get to coordinate this defense. There's one good player on it, and we're trading him?
We're trading.
Awesome.
Right.
Great.
No, it's not going to be it's not a popular plan. But again, it's how do you make all of these things? How do you make all of these things work? So
I do think there are a couple of other things they can get done here, before the new league year starts, just to cross off this offseason.
Yeah.
Number one, they've tried the orange pants. It's not working.
Yeah. Can we?
Okay.
It's a good place to start.
Let's just no harm, no foul. Tried it.
Yeah.
I was open to it. Then I saw it in practice. No. Let's just release a statement today.
We'd like to make a statement on orange pants.
Before we start, let's just acknowledge no one had any ill intent here. We tried the orange pants thing. We look like the Cleveland Browns. We don't want to do that.
We don't want to
Let's donate the orange pants to the Browns. Whatever you got to do. Let's get rid of the orange pants. Has a decision been made about the ping pong table in 2025?
I feel like it's probably going to stay, right? I mean, it
Okay.
returned and they
All
basically just started winning. So I think anybody that loves to laugh about the ping pong table where it's, oh, team's now loose. Oh, teams needs more discipline, right? The ping pong table is 11. Look, it worked. I think it's back. I think it's going to be back. The ping pong table is going to be a part of it. It's going to be the key.
Okay. Well, I think that decision has to be made early. And, and I think, you could sort of iron that out here in the coming weeks. And I'm also here for this being an off-season topic every year, leaping tiger versus striped bee.
Mm-hmm.
We went with the striped bee this year. What was the home record?
Not good.
Right?
Not good. You're right. Leaping tiger could have really changed the dynamic of that game. You know what? We haven't discussed enough Ryan Rico being distracted by the midfield logo that was around him, trying to get that hold down in the kick for Evan. So, I mean, that's really, if that had been a leaping tiger, and I mean, it would have been a totally different scenario. They make that kick and they're in the playoffs.
No question.
Playoffs.
No question about it. And so, when you have a losing season, especially a losing season at home, everything should be on the table. And I didn't get enough of last year, leaping tiger versus striped bee. I didn't realize so many people felt so strongly about this. I didn't realize so many people had such affection for the leaping tiger. And I feel like if we're going to sort of strip this thing down and review everything from the bottom up, at some point we need to, was our lack of home field success last year at all attributed to the fact that we went striped bee instead of leaping tiger? And do we maybe revisit that? I don't know. Maybe it's not the most important thing this offseason, but if I was in the front office, I'd bring it up in a meeting just to see what my colleagues and what my employers had to say.
And is there a consideration of putting, the barriers? They obviously came to light with the tragedy in New Orleans, but the barriers that can come up on a street to keep cars from going past them, right? They go up and down. Consider installing them on the crosswalk that goes to the practice field.
Yes.
Okay. So that when it's time for practice, all the barriers go up to make sure nobody can get to the players, and then digging out stairs that go into that hill. So you don't have to climb the hill. If people want to go up the hill, they can just walk upstairs, and then we can avoid the controversy of how dare adults be asked to walk across the street to go to their practice, and what are we learning from the way they're going up, they're choosing to go up the hill or not up the hill. I think that this has got to be taken into consideration for all the bad PR that has come along with this. I think it's got to be looked into.
Well, there is a gentleman, my daughter, I take my daughter to school every day, and there is a gentleman he's the crossing guard, right? And I think he works in the office. I think he's a teacher's aide. I don't know his name. He is awesome at what he does.
Yes.
This guy, I get a kick out of sometimes, he looks like a college basketball coach putting people in the right position. And, school is not in for most of training camp. Hire this gentleman to be the crossing guard.
Yeah.
Right?
I think you need a team. I think you need 6 crossing guards.
Wow.
Okay. A full team. Maybe, go full football team. Go 11. Put an offense out there that lines up, directs traffic, calls things out, everybody paying attention to make sure that everybody is fully safe and not getting hit by a car trying to cross a generally not very busy street in downtown Cincinnati.
Yeah. A lot of time to think about this.
Yes. I'm going to say it'd be good to get ahead of it now, though. I think we've pointed out some really important things that we got to make sure
there are some things that you can't address until the league year begins. These are not on that list of stuff. I mean, these are things you can knock off. Just next week after that, maybe they've hired a defensive coordinator, filled the offensive line coach, hired the other 2 guys. And then, all right, what are some things we could do before the new league year starts? I think orange pants, leaping tiger, crossing guard, ping pong table. That's a pretty long list of things to work on.
We'll request some availability from everyone who's in charge of those decisions. Whoever their crossing guard guy is.
That's why you guys hopefully you guys should like try to get Duke, and then like first question. All right, Duke, ping pong table, and just see where things.
What's your feelings on orange pants?
Yeah. So the orange pants thing didn't work out. Are they in the cards for 2025? What do we got?
What do we got? I'm glad we got to the bottom of the important stuff here, Mo. I appreciate your time as always. I know that everyone is listening to you on ESPN 1530 from 3 to 6. Of course, I'm on with Mo, and we'll continue to be on Tuesdays from 3 to 4. So keep checking us out there, and we'll keep doing this. The topics aren't going away.
No,
they will only get there. They will only get louder and continue, and we can go further down. There's a lot of things on the list here that we didn't even get near. So we've got plenty of time to do that. I appreciate your time as always, and we will.
I hate that the offseason has started, but it's gonna be interesting, and I think it's gonna be fun. I think it's
gonna be fun too. We'll talk about it every step of the way. Thanks, buddy. We'll talk to you later.
All right, man. Thank you.
Have a good one.